With 56% of the S&P 500 in correction territory or worse, check out some of the biggest laggards: Halliburton, Mylan, Macy's, Activision, Blizzard, and Nvidia, all deep in bear market territory. So we thought now might be the best time to do some bottom fishing. Let's go off the charts with Chris Verrone, who's ready to reel in some names for us. Chris, what are you looking at?
Hey, Melissa, well, let's first start with the index, and let's put in context what we've seen, where we are, and what comes next. We've had this 25% rally off the lows over about a period of 4 months. We've come in 4.5 or 5% from the highs. A modest correction, and I think it's early to say that we're deeply oversold yet. You still have about 40% of stocks above their 50-day moving, and it's just not washed out to the extent that you would expect for a decline of that magnitude. So I think there's a little bit more work to go on the downside. Maybe 2650, 2700, I think, is an area where there's better opportunity. So when we want to focus on names here, we want to look for stocks that are more washed out. You take a GE, for example. It's still down about 30% from its 52-week high. We've been impressed with the leadership that it's actually offered over the last number of weeks, and it's quietly come out of oversold territory. We think this is a stock that can be bought. You get it above that 1050 level. We're looking at $13 as the target. Then we look at a name like a Lowe's. This has corrected about 12% from the high, so nearly double what we've seen from the S&P. But what we like about it here is this series of higher lows that we have. Bottomed right here near the 70s. It trades near 100 today. And I think important in relative strength terms, it's actually outperformed along the way. So back at support near the 200, we think that's a timely buy. And then one more on the long side here. It's coming about 18% from the highs. This is Microchip, part of the semis. Clearly a very important group and an important name. It is very oversold here. The RSI is in the low 30s. We're back to the 200-day moving average right here. A good area, a timely area, we think, to add some exposure. And I would also note, for the first time in about 6 months, you have the 50 actually break above the 200. So we're oversold in an uptrend. I think conversely, we want to be skeptical of the names that have rallied in weak trends. And there's a handful of them in healthcare. This is healthcare equipment, Beck & Dickinson, BDX. This just looks more like a top to us. Failed to make a new high here. Closed on the lows today. Didn't rally. Making new relative lows here. One of the more vulnerable names. So I think you have to be careful with these names rallying in weak trends and instead buy leaders back at support that are oversold.
Chris, why don't you come back on over to the desk?
Bring him back.
It'd be kind of awkward if we kept him over there with the chair empty and all. Guy,
yes.
Which
See, Microchip is an interesting stock we don't talk a lot about. In valuation, it's reasonable. They just reported earnings. However, Melissa, you have a major, and we like this double top. We talked about the S&P. Well, guess what? You have the same thing in Microchip around the 103 level. Traded up in the fall, had a huge sell-off, traded back, seemingly failed. At this point, with no catalyst at least in my purview, with the market seemingly vulnerable here, I think Microchip actually goes down from here.
One of those names, Macy's is a name that really has not, found a whole lot of love this year. It's a name that if you look at the same-store sales trends, well, we're not going to tell you that Macy's is going back to the glory days. They are starting to grow top line. And I think they've lapped some very difficult comps. So if you look at a company that's already reaffirmed they're going to make, somewhere between 3 and 3/4, this is a company that's trading 6 or just south of 6 times earnings with a major dividend. Not the reason to buy a stock. But again, sometimes people have questioned whether the balance sheet allows them to pay that, and they definitely can.
Yeah.
I like Macy's. I like GE. I'm still long GE. I think GE turned a corner on a perception basis where they're sort of given a lot more leeway, a lot more flexibility. So I definitely see that in the chart. You don't see these fall off a cliff moves anymore. So it stopped going down on headlines that would have otherwise taken it down.
I think it's a very important stock for the market as well, right? This is a stock that would lead you lower on the downside in these prior drawdowns. The fact that it actually acts a little bit better here, I think, is encouraging that after this corrective phase, this is not a market that goes to zero here. I think there's actually some value being created. And look at names like GE, even Lowe's, given the exposure to the housing space. Home builders have actually acted really well during this whole period. I think those are actually decent signs here for the broader market.
My view on GE, which is my #1 pick in the CNBC Power Lunch stock draft, by the way, doing very well. Some of my other picks, not so much.
What are your other picks again?
No, I had Macy's. We just talked about that. Right. And Electronic Arts has actually been the dog. But with General Electric, there's no one left to sell this stock, in my view. I realize that there are people that could be speculating on the short side, but if you look at where the institutional following went on this stock as a function of the dividend, as a function of issues, the biggest issue for this company may still be the balance sheet. There's no question. And if we get into an environment where people are starting to look at, massive debt stories that begin to, fallen angels, GE is the definition, if you look in any type of investment book.
So one or two downgrades away from being junk, basically.
Look, if the global economy is what, GE's going to have trouble.
I think GE does have trouble. But can I bring something up? Because although I appear on this show, I'm also a viewer of this show. And you teased something. You said we have a top technician coming on.
Yes.
So I was like, wow, we're going to have Carter Braxton Worth or somebody. Now, Chris Verrone is a top technician.
Of course he is. He's in the pantheon.
But he's on the desk tonight. So that was sort of, there was a, I don't know.
Why? No, but he's
disingenuous.
No, this is what I promised. I promised the viewers a top technician would bring us bottom fishing through the charts. What did we get? A top technician going bottom fishing.
You know what I think is disingenuous? Wasting good time on the show.
I'm not wasting time because our audience wants to know. I know that there are people at home
still ahead.
want to know.